And we're back just for a moment or two. So we've tied together the ideas of incarceration, pretrial detention, which is what really fills up our local and county jails, people waiting, people who can't make bail. Obviously, people who can make bail get the hell out because they don't want to put themselves through this. The lack of health care, the lack of basic hygiene, the lack of needed psychological medications, are all part of this process. And at this point, then you have to ask, what is my role as a citizen in this country if I can be treated in such a manner? Notice also that we're talking about pandemics at this point in time. It's kind of all on our minds. And we think about, okay, so what is my exposure to COVID-19 when I'm incarcerated? Notice I'm incarcerated against my will. Probably a 65% probability that I'm incarcerated against my will because I'm poor and couldn't make bail. Not that I'm guilty and not that I'm being punished. And now I'm being threatened with this additional risk of illness in terms of COVID-19, not to mention all the other illnesses that were already present prior to COVID-19 under these circumstances. And is this the way that we want to treat our fellow human beings? So all these questions kind of come up. Now, when we look at the expansion of the prison system, and in large part this is a result of the drug war, and the drug war was occurring, the war on drugs, started when I was a teenager, and look how freaking old I am now. And one of the questions that amuses me in this regard then, if we've been fighting the drug war for 40 or 50 years and we're still fighting it, is this a war that we're ever going to win? Is this calling this a war, does that make any sense? And then the concept of then winning this as a war, does that make any sense either? And how you answer those questions. But one thing that the drug war does do is provides prison with a steady stream of people to incarcerate. The problem here is that as prisons became private entities, and that is for-profit industries, right? It's one thing if the state is operating a prison and then the prison represents itself as an expense to the taxpayers. But there was this general idea that, wow, if we privatize the prisons, that has allowed private companies to run them. And then there's always this myth that private companies do things more efficiently than government agencies do, which is not borne out in a lot of contexts, but it's a very popular talking point. Let's privatize prisons and we can incarcerate people more cheaply. And then people start bragging, hey, we can feed our inmates on 22 cents a day. And it's like, well, if the prison is about rehabilitation, I don't know if that's a great place to start. Now, if the prison's about retribution, then yeah, maybe we can punish people on inferior food and feel justified in so doing. But really, I think the grim reality that we might want to face at this point in time, or not, is that prisons are profit-making businesses. And that is, the state pays a private prison X number of dollars to maintain a prisoner. To the extent that the private prison can do that for less money than the state pays, that represents profit. So the more cheaply I operate my prison, the greater my profits. And in '83, our company, and this is Correction Corporation of America, I took this from their website. A lot of this doesn't exist anymore because now that these companies are starting to hide their identities, change their names, once people started getting wind of this. In 1983, our company became the first to provide privatized prison, jail, and detention services. For more than 3 decades, we strive to aid governments by reducing costs, alleviating overcrowding, and providing quality correction care for inmates and detainees. Our approach to public-private partnership in corrections combines the cost savings innovation of the private sector with strict guidelines and consistent oversight of the public sector. This continues to produce proven results. Now, what these results are, in terms of proof, is kind of deceptive at best, right? And let's face it, if I'm operating a company that profits on X number of prisoners, the way to increase my profit is to imprison more people. So then I may lobby people in Congress to, or state legislatures, to increase sentence length, which means more money, to increase the number of people convicted, right? To fight a war on drugs because it supplies a never-ending stream of prisoners on which I can profit. So, Correction Corporation of America, there's a saying often shared by CCA employees, we've got each other's backs, but what about the prisoner? Each CCA facility is like a small town. Our correctional facilities feature kitchens, dining halls, places of worship, classroom, vocational training centers, health care clinics. Teamwork is a way of life for CCA employees, and that's how we make it work when providing the industry's highest quality, safety, and security around the clock. And that's what's stated on the website. What is the truth? Well, that, needs to be determined. The difficulty is that the idea of profiting off the incarceration of others for some of us is just unconscionable. But the difficulty is insane in this because, as we look to manage our 401ks or our 403bs or our IRAs, our annuities, whatever, our retirement income, it's almost impossible to not be invested in private prisons in one form or another. And now a lot of the private prisons have kind of moved away from designating themselves as private prisons within the investment context and have been lumped under or folded into various property management kind of titles. So when I asked my financial guy, I said, look, I don't want to be invested whatsoever in private prisons. Can you assure me that I am not invested in private prisons? After a couple months of research, he came back and we met. And he said, look, this is almost impossible to do. I mean, there are a few funds out there, and he gave me a list of a few funds to which I changed, right? But that make value-based decisions not to invest in private detention. But it's virtually impossible to do. And if you take like the state teachers retirement system, which most of us in Ohio, education have our retirement built on, they are in fact investors in private incarceration. And for some of us, that's just not something that we can accept. That we should not be profiting off the misfortune of others or the detention of others. That should be a cost to us as a society, a cost that we want to reduce through philosophically better education, increased opportunity, etc. To fail people and then imprison them and profit off their imprisonment is a bridge too far for some of us. Anyway, from the beginning of class that I was going to freely state my opinion, and when it's my opinion, I'm going to declare it as such, and you guys can say, oh, well, Mark's full of shit, and I don't agree with this opinion, and you're welcome to do that, right? On the other hand, when we look at the private prison situation, if the state believes that it's a money saver to have this done privately rather than state-run, then that would be maybe one of the pros we could advance, that it represents a cost savings. But regardless, so you pay your money, you take your choices in this regard. We got one more coming. One more. We got number 16. Does evil belong in psychology? Does the term evil? And I'll warn you, that's a long one. I'll be getting it ready and dropping it on you probably next week. But that's it for today, and this is brought to you by Incarceration Nation, the country that incarcerates more people per capita than any other industrialized nation on the planet. So there's some winning for us, huh? So take care, stay healthy. See you later.